But we have with us this morning the fourth of our founders who are presenting to this event, and that is Salah Khalil. Now, Salah is the founder of Macat. Macat is a company, again, a commercial company, that has worked with leading universities in a research-based way to develop their capacity to enable students to develop critical thinking skills. Salah, you're welcome.
Right. Good morning, everyone. This is a topic that is quite relevant and important, especially given the problems that the World Economic Forum and other leading thought leadership has mentioned regarding the future of skills, the future of degrees, and the future of jobs. So I'm going to start by just laying out a little bit the grounds. Then I'm going to tell you what I've done in two separate organizations to promote critical thinking. One of them is a charitable organization, and the other one is a business. The charitable organization is concerned with the Arab world. The business is works on a global level. Your Excellencies, honorable guests, and ladies and gentlemen, it is a great pleasure and honor to address you on this very special occasion that is kindly hosted by yet another successful Middle East Education and Thought Leadership Forum. My topic today is about critical thinking and why the assessment and instruction of critical thinking skills needs to be placed at the heart of any conception of an envisioned future of education or an envisioned future of work. Critical thinking skills are cognitive tools that can facilitate the transformation from procedural knowledge to structural knowledge. They can equally enhance our ability to reduce the acquisition and accumulation of inert or unusable knowledge. The outbreak of the last pandemic was accompanied by what the World Health Organization has described as a massive infodemic. We were all exposed to a mass of coronavirus information, misinformation, disinformation, and malinformation with little or no time to consider options, analyze decisions, or evaluate consequences. It is easy to blame social media for all the fake news, though social media is not the enemy, ignorance is. As we observe what is recently or currently happening in our countries, region, or globally, we could safely say that critical thinking is in short supply. Few people could question the centrality of critical thinking skills, particularly as we encounter digitization at scale, or as some proponents of post-humanism narratives would call the robotization of humanity. In fact, we know now that the next global crisis is set to take place in 2030, giving us 8 years from today to understand the crisis, identify the risks, plan the responses, and implement sensible recommendations with minimal disruptions to our daily lives. A large number of reports estimate that by 2030, more than 1 billion people will need some form of skilling, reskilling, or upskilling if the global economy is to avoid losing more than $50 trillion in GDP as a result of technological unemployment, changing demographics, globalization, climate change, urbanization, and most significantly, rampant inequality. The key obstacle, as the World Bank and others pointed out, is a workforce that lacks critical thinking. To drive and transform the new emerging economy, the result, an urgent need propelled by structural, economic, and technical changes and accelerated by the pandemic to nurture these skills in a new generation of students, graduates, employees, managers, entrepreneurs, and civil servants. In parallel, regional trends in the Arab world, historically known as the cradle of higher education, with the world's first universities being established in the Middle East and North Africa, has a population similar to that of the United States of America, with only 800 universities versus 8,000 higher education institutions in the US. Furthermore, countries within our region with the highest youth unemployment rates of all regions worldwide are veering towards social, political, and economic instability, with the prospects of a workforce that could potentially face difficult choices between unemployment, underemployment, informal or precarious work, and at best, a pressure to immigrate with all the risks associated with migration channels. You have heard other colleagues during the conference talk in more details and with great expertise about such challenges. But what can be done and what must be done? A recent report authored by the Hauser Institute for Civil Society at the Center for Public Leadership at the Harvard Kennedy School, in collaboration with UBS, states, and I quote, global high net worth individual wealth has increased almost fourfold in the last 20 years and now totals almost $60 trillion. It is estimated that the world has over 15 million millionaires and 2,000 billionaires. Philanthropic institutions considered in this study were 260,000 foundations in 38 countries, of which two-thirds hold $1.5 trillion in assets, spend more than $150 billion on an annual basis. Why am I telling you all this? Because funding was an issue that was raised in some of the presentations that took place as a major challenge for education across the globe. Funding sources, whether it's government, private, or philanthropists, I think the role of philanthropists is really important, and that's why I just would like to stress this point a little bit. Education is also a top philanthropic priority in all these countries. Equally, there is a mismatch between the ratio of Arab wealth to Arab giving when compared to counterparts in the United States and Europe. So actually, the Arab world is facing a bigger problem than the rest of the world, because philanthropy in the Arab world, in terms of percentage of wealth, is not matching what others are doing in the United States and in Europe. I think Alexis de Tocqueville, in his famous work, Democracy in America, appearing in 2 volumes in 1835 and 1840, explained why the US was leading the world in charitable giving. He coined the term self-interest, properly understood, to explain why this was happening. He discovered that the interest of 1% that controls 90% of the global wealth is intrinsically tied to the interest of 99% that control 10% of the global wealth. In other words, it's not only good for the soul to give back charitable giving, but it's also good for business. We need to pave the way for such philanthropy, not just in the Arab world, but outside the Arab world, and hail those who take this lead to create a new wave and movement of catalytic philanthropy or strategic philanthropy using critical thinking and impactful and contagious giving. We all share a common belief in the power of education to transform lives. But wouldn't it be great if this power was shared equally around the world? Whether you believe in education for enlightenment or education for employment, We need an open conversation about the future of degrees, the future of jobs, and the future of skills. Since I will be talking to you about critical thinking skills and the organizations I created to promote critical thinking in the Arab world and globally, I would like to end my talk with an open discussion about a proposed simple vision for education and for the future of work that has a central pillar of equality, a DNA that is anti-inequality, a sort of preventative approach rather than the corrective approaches that we all heard during not just this conference, but many conferences. We are in a problem, and obviously 20 years ago, whoever created the visions, they're not really working well because inequality is rampant and growing. But first, let me start talking about the organizations I've created. I spent the last 12 years and raised over $40 million for two organizations, trying to understand critical thinking and creating dissemination channels that would not only measure critical thinking, but would also help in developing critical thinking skills. The first organization is the Alexandria Trust, which is a charity, a UK charity, that works to promote world-class education in the Arab region. The second organization is Macat International, a UK business that works to measure and develop critical thinking skills. First, let me start by talking briefly about the Alexandria Trust. The Alexandria Trust was formed in 2012 to promote world-class education in the Arab region using an incubation model. We looked for the best ideas in education, and we would incubate them, raise money for them, govern that expenditure of money, make sure that it's all done in the right way, and then move forward. There are three projects that we did. One project was trying to translate seminal works in humanities, arts, and social sciences from English into Arabic. The second project was to create a consultancy service for ministers of higher education in the region. Basically, we would act like a McKinsey, but the ministries would not be charged anything because this would be money raised to support the experts going to the minister, and the minister would be in charge of what to get them to work on and what to get them to do. So he is in control of the agenda, complete control of the agenda, he or she. The third project, which is what I'm going to talk to you about because this is completely relevant to critical thinking, is Alphanar Media. You will see a booth of Alphanar Media outside. Alphanar Media is an organization that covers news about education, arts, and culture in the Arab world across 22 countries. Our definition of the Arab world is countries that are members in the Arab League. So we created this organization. We raised $8 million from the likes of Ford, Carnegie, UN Democracy Fund, the Open Society Foundation, the Arab Fund, and many others. Alphanar Media now has 3,000 stories. Stories about education, culture, and arts in the Arab world. The publication has trained 60 journalists in the region, specialized in education news coverage, and arts news coverage, and culture news coverage. The publication was run by someone called David Wheeler, who was the head of the Chronicle of Higher Education in the US, or the equivalent of Times Higher Education in the UK. And he ran it for 6 years. Now the publication is run by an Egyptian called Nadia Goueli, who spent 29 years at Reuters. And she has actually taken the publication from a completely grant-dependent organization to an organization that actually generates income, that is not dependent on grant makers. But it was the grant-making money that got us to this stage. The future is extremely bright. Alphanar Media has many products. They have a product called Spotlight on Universities, which covers all university news, the president of the university, what they have to say, the students in the university, the teachers. It also helps researchers. It has a number of resources, such as the scholarship resource page. So an Arab student could go to this resource page and find out all the different scholarships available globally for them to apply to. It has a resource page for parents who would like to see the kind of accreditation a university has. So this is an accreditation resource page. And there's going to be a lot more products like sponsored content and many other events that will take place. The Alexandria Trust and Alphanar Media played a pivotal role in the education of immigrants. So this was a huge. We covered immigration, education in immigration heavily in the years following the problems in Iraq, Syria, Libya, Yemen, and other places. So this is about the Alexandria Trust. The other organization, I mean, if I could say one thing that we've done is we've actually created a wealth of information. It is the most cited publication in all research that happens on education today. And what we have done is we've actually connected universities within one country, we've connected universities across borders within the Arab world, and we've connected universities, policymakers, parents, students in the Arab world with the outside world. We've done our best to do that and will continue to do that in Alphanar Media. So I would urge you to visit their booth, please, and see they have other things that you may be interested in to discuss. The second organization, which is close to my heart as well, is Macat International Limited. Macat was established in 2009 to measure and develop critical thinking skills. We spent almost 2 years on the definition of critical thinking. As you are all aware, critical thinking, the body of literature, rests in 3 disciplines: philosophy, psychology, and education. If you look at philosophy, it has a conception of critical thinking as perfection of thought, or the perfect thinker, or the perfect thinking. Psychology is more interested in the actions and behaviors critical thinkers do, and education is more interested in information processing. So basically, it's like a pyramid. At the bottom of the pyramid, it's about regurgitating and rote learning, and at the top of the pyramid is about analytical comprehension. Although the 3 disciplines were not agreeing on definitions, they agreed on one thing: that critical thinking is a set of skills and behaviors. We at Macat left the behavior side and we only focused on the skills side and worked with the University of Cambridge to develop a definition of critical thinking that is skills-based. So Macat conceives critical thinking as the component skills of problem solving, of analysis, of creative thinking, of interpretation, of evaluation, and of reasoning. 6 skills. We then worked with the American Association of State Colleges and Universities, with Community Colleges for International Development, and with experts from PISA, OECD, and many other organizations to create a framework for critical thinking. And the framework is this 6 main skills, and under each skill, 4 sub-skills. So essentially, the framework is 6 main skills and 24 sub-skills. And we call this the PACER framework. We then created a process, which is test, teach, and track. And followed by that, we created the products, which are 3 products. The first one is an assessment, an online assessment that takes 60 minutes to do. And it gives you your profile of critical thinking. The second one is a library that analyzes seminal works in the humanities, arts, and social sciences. So basically, it has 220 titles. It has been proven by the University of Cambridge to improve critical thinking by up to 15% per day. And it also carries the brand Routledge. So it's actually, Taylor & Francis is the international distributor of the English language library. Shanghai Foreign Language Education Press has translated the library into Chinese, almost 100 titles. The Library of Alexandria has translated 24 titles into Arabic, and Akhbar al-Yawm in Egypt is the publisher of that Arabic library as well. We have French, and we have Turkish, and many other languages coming. So that's the second product, is an analysis of seminal works across 15 disciplines in the humanities, arts, and social sciences. All these titles come in hardcover, paperback, audiobook, ebook, video book. So tremendous multimedia content that has been prepared by almost 750 professors in the top 20 universities worldwide. We were the largest employer of professors in 2016 and 2015. We then, after the library, we have master classes as well. And the master classes are domain agnostic and domain specific. The literature on critical thinking says that critical thinking could be taught as a single subject, or it could be taught subject specific. So on the single subject, we use the library, we use a multidisciplinary approach to impart critical thinking in master classes. The master classes can be long or short, depending on the need of the university. However, the subject-specific master classes come in 4 types. The first type is subject and root subject, so critical thinking for economics, or critical thinking for engineering, or critical thinking for electrical engineering, or critical thinking for mechanical engineering. The second type is subject-specific in sectors, so critical thinking for oil and gas, critical thinking for healthcare, critical thinking for industry. The third type is issues, so critical thinking for climate change, critical thinking for corruption, critical thinking for Black Lives Matter, critical thinking for inequality. And the final part is jobs, critical thinking for CFOs, critical thinking for CEOs, and all this system is built on a micro-credential design. So basically, we work with the universities on a revenue share basis that we provide these master classes to them. After we've done all this and spent more than $30 million on putting all this together and almost 12 years of continuous research, last week we signed a contract with OECD to develop the next global instrument for measuring critical and creative thinking over the next 3 years. This is going to be probably the largest study done on critical thinking globally, and probably going to be one of the, if not the standard, the global standard for measuring critical and creative thinking. So that's briefly about the Alexandria Trust and Macat. As you can see, we've devoted a lot of time, money, energy, and we were very fortunate with people who helped us mobilize resources and participated in this project, which are now almost exceeding something like 5,000 to 6,000 people over the last 12 years. The vision I wanted to leave you with, and then I'd like to open the floor for questions, if there are any questions, is a simple vision. It's a vision based on equality. And it basically goes something like this. What if anyone can study anything they want, anytime, anywhere, anyhow? And what if the same can apply to work? What if I can do any job, anytime, anywhere, anyhow? Now, I know this sounds almost crazy, but the idea is making this opportunity available. COVID told us there is nothing crazy. Basically, we were all at home, shopping online, working online, studying online, meeting family online. So I think it's at least worthy of putting our minds towards a vision for education and a vision for employment that is based on equality, not one that reacts to inequality, but one that actually projects and uses DNA of equality as its primary pillar of moving forward. So I will not keep you longer. I know it's the first session and you've got a long day ahead of you, but I'm happy to answer any questions or any comments. I'm happy to take as well. Thank you very much for listening. I appreciate your time. Thank you so much. Thanks.
Well, thank you very much indeed, Salah. There are no questions online. There are a couple of questions in the room. Can we take both of the questions and you respond in what we, yeah. Take the two questions, please, if you could introduce yourselves.
Good morning. Thank you so much, Salah. That was a wonderful presentation. John Phillips here. Yeah, really interested to hear a little bit more. If you could tell us about the OECD plans and what that might look like, if you can, if it's not subject to confidentiality or further discussions. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much. Oh, another question, I guess.
Yeah, if we take the second question as well.
Hello, I'm Julian Plumley. Thanks very much for the absolutely inspiring talk. Two very quick questions. One is, are you working with schools as well as higher education? And is there progress there? And the second one is, I'm really interested in the definition of critical thinking and how you're getting that across to educational institutions, because it tends to be something that they know it when they see it, and it can be very difficult for them to get it across to students. Thank you.
Thank you. So I'll start with the OECD one. So essentially the project is basically OECD has been developing K-12 critical and creative thinking with ACT, you know, the large American test provider, right? And they did not develop such neither the concept or the test for higher education. They found that we've actually done a lot of work. We're specialists, so we don't claim to develop or deliver 80,000 skills like some people do. We're just focused on 6 skills, and we spend the better half of 12 years and $30 million to do just that. Yeah. So the project will start with basically mirroring the conceptual frameworks of PACER, which is problem solving, analysis, creative thinking, interpretation, evaluation, and reasoning, with the analytical and conceptual framework of OECD to come up with a unified framework of a construct. So that's the first part of the project. The second part is basically OECD will look at our item bank, and by item I mean question. So our assessment is powered by an item and by an item bank, and it's powered by an assessment management platform. We have now moved on to, previously we were in another platform. We've now moved on to Tata Consulting Services. And the reason we've moved to Tata Consulting Services, because they've done 500 million tests to date. We have recently signed an enterprise deal with Egypt to measure and develop the critical thinking of 1.5 million students over the next 5 years. So essentially the numbers, we've already done 50,000 last year. This year we're looking at 150,000, and every year it will grow by 100,000, and this is just Egypt. We have similar conversations across the Arab world, and hopefully we will work with the Association of Arab Universities as well in the OECD project and maybe expand the numbers. So we needed to also change the platform. So the platform will have an item bank and questions, and the item bank will basically generate assessments automatically. Now, so that's the second part. The second part is basically to test our item bank and to see psychometrically, from a psychometric perspective, is the item bank has all the relevant validities, which we've done already, but they have to do that OECD as well, right? And then decide on whether or to what extent extend the generic assessment of critical thinking to also subject-specific assessment of critical thinking. because OECD came up with some ideas of using the library as an assessment tool. So this is not an assessment to select, but it's an assessment to develop. Or assessment to learn. There are two different techniques for assessment. Even the master classes will be used in the same way. So that will keep us focused as an assessment company, assessment and learning company, rather than being spread over a number of other areas. The third part is going into adaptive testing. So that's really what we want. So this is the future for all assessments, is that you give the student a question, they don't do well, you give them an easier question, and so on. So essentially the biggest thing in the platform will be not monitoring what the student learns or how the student scores, but actually how they think and how they learn. That's really what we're interested in. So which is slightly different from most sort of assessments that are available today. So we're very, very interested to collect the data, and this will work on something called the digital twins. I don't know if you're aware of the concept or not. Sorry. So the concept of digital twins is that for every assessment taker, there will be a digital twin. And basically you can do a lot of simulations on that. And the more they are engaged in adaptive testing, the more of a more solid profile, which gives the teachers a lot more to go on than that. And obviously it leads eventually to something called a digital thread, which is a thread that goes through a number of data points, basically to make something that is insightful for the teacher and for the university. I hope that answered the question.
Okay. Salah, thank you very much. No, I know, but we're going to have to move on, I'm afraid. We have a bit of a quick minute. 1 minute.
So as far as the construct is concerned, the definition happened with the University of Cambridge. And it basically, they took 50 professors from each of the disciplines, philosophy, psychology, and education, and they asked them to list the skills that make up critical thinking. You see, we avoided the subjective definitions and we said skills-based. So essentially it was to identify the skills and identify the skills that they all agreed on. And this came up with the PACER model, basically.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. Sorry to cut you off. Can I just say there is more information on the platform website where you will find more. And Salah, thank you very much indeed.